The Who spoke directly to us. Their music, their lyrics, the energy in their music. And it just didn't get any bigger than The Who.
They were one of the biggest bands that everybody wanted to see. And when The Who was on the radio, you cranked your radio up and you drove around Finneytown and wanted everybody to know that you were listening to The Who.
It was just one of the go-to bands, like the Rolling Stones and The Who. I mean, you just had to, put it in your repertoire of being there.
Right.
They're coming to Cincinnati, and the second we heard about it, we were just beyond excited.
Back in those days, we'd camp out. We got there at noon on the show day to get ready to go for the concert that was later on that evening.
It was huge, right?
It was big time.
Right.
And once we had those tickets, it was like gold. I felt like putting it in a safety deposit box. It was really, the anticipation was amazing.
I don't mind other guys dancing with my girl.
In those days, I'd put a show on sale, whatever it was, an arena, stadium, and it would be gone in minutes. The band were at their peak. The dynamic of the band was phenomenal. And so I think I'm safe in saying they were probably the biggest rock and roll band in the world at that time.
I'm singing this note 'cause it fits in well with the chords.
And our shows were long in those days. They were 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours. So you kind of it becomes like a whirlwind. You're kind of half in your body. It's a weird space. And then of course you push back into it the following day, and the following day, and the following day. So it becomes like a dream zone in a way. But that dreadful night of the 3rd of December became one of the worst dreams I've ever had in my life.
It's something that I'll surely remember on my deathbed. I've only maybe got 20, 30, 40 people that I remember who've passed in my life that I really care about. But, the 11 from Cincinnati are part of that number.
We was up at the top and everybody was just pushing. I was on the bottom for about 20 minutes.
You was being stomped on for 20 minutes?
I couldn't breathe. I thought I was dying. I lost my shoe. We were with these people right here and he's dying.
What happened? Was this just too much pushing, or was it
people would not stop. They had intercoms going, move back, and nobody would move. Oh, it's a wreck in there.
People were just getting stamped on, and she was underneath, and I was trying to pull her out, and everybody was stamping on everybody.
You couldn't get up?
No, you couldn't get up, man. People were pushing all over everywhere.
Were they trying to control the crowd? The people,
they couldn't.
On December 3rd, 1979, 11 people were killed at a Who concert outside the Riverfront Coliseum in downtown Cincinnati. An event that was supposed to bring excitement and joy to thousands of rock and roll fans turned into terror and panic.
John!
It made national headlines. 40 years later, survivors, victims' families, and band members talk about that night for the first time in depth. It has haunted many of them over the decades. One community lost 3 young lives.
My name is Matt Wergers, class of 1979, Finneytown High School. I don't know what overcome of everybody there. It was a free-for-all is basically what it was. There was a lot of people, I'm going to say juiced up, ready to go see this show.
There were 5 of us who went down together, and we always parked in the same spot.
Tickets sold weeks in advance for $10 apiece. Lines formed outside the venue hours before the show was slated to start at 8 p.m.
And there was just a lot of energy going on. And in the meantime, you had, no pressure valve to open. You had the doors remained shut, but still, it was a crowd that we were kind of familiar with.
Then fans heard music from inside the venue.
People thought the show was starting. It was a lot of fun up there at first, and then it just got into like a tidal wave. I was not as big as I am now, and I had my girlfriend with me, and we were literally where my feet weren't even on the ground. I was grabbing her so tight that my feet and her feet were not on the ground because of the pressure of the people.
Survivor Matt Wergers focused on keeping his girlfriend safe.
Got out of the crowd when she couldn't breathe anymore. I was trying to pick her up so she could get air because she was shorter than me. And I got over to the wall, to the doors, and that's when a big surge came and pushed us once, and then it pushed us another time. And then the third or fourth time, the pressure was so bad that we literally went through one of them plate glass windows because of the pressure of the bodies pushing us against the glass. We had nowhere else to go, and the glass broke, and officers came right away right there, and I just did a body check on an officer, which I shouldn't have done, and we got into the venue, and several other 100 people came through that glass door also.
Thank God that glass door broke.
Oh, there could have been a lot more deaths there. I'm positive of that. If that wouldn't, that was like a dam breaking. If it didn't break the wall with the whole, let some of the water out, or so to speak, the people to subside some of the pressure that was there.
And I got to believe when that door broke and all those people kind of pushed towards that side door and a lot of people fell, I got to believe that's when, that's when our friends and a lot of the 11, that's where they probably never got up again after that. And I remember I was with all of my strength from an 18-year-old, probably 145-pound guy, trying to keep some room between my body and, just keep some space.
Chaos ensued.
This had been going on for maybe 15 minutes, maybe 10.
Yeah.
A grip was down in front. You couldn't really, your vantage point until you got pushed right onto the pile.
Right.
And you couldn't really tell what people
What
were
was going on.
back, what was going on. Or how, you would think you could get up, but there was no space to get up, except for standing on other people, and then,
Right.
you'd get knocked back down again. And so it was getting pretty chaotic, pretty scary.
At one point, Tammy Hartfales fell to the ground. Her friend Doug picked her and others up.
And Doug, who, thank God he was really tall, he just kind of grabbed me.
Doug, I don't know, he was trying to pull some guy out that was on the bottom of the pile, and his head was right by our feet, and he was completely blue colored. He was pretty much gone at that moment. And people were yelling, back up, but 10 people back, first you didn't know what was going on,
right?
And it was impossible to back up because it was that congested and tight.
Yeah.
And at that point, the whole crowd surged that way. And that, a lot of people, from what I saw, went down at that point. And I have to believe, I've thought, 40 years of thinking about this and turning it over. And in a way, the way it happened, the circumstances surrounding it, I still haven't completely assimilated what happened that night. My friend is there 1 minute, and I never see him again.
That was one of the most traumatic times of my life, I would think. Waking up and hearing your mom say your friend's dead.
There was no reason to suspect that this was dangerous. Your children are supposed to be safe at one of those events, and that, why did this have to happen?
I was watching television, and I saw what was going on, and of course I was alert to that, whatever they were showing, and I saw them carrying a kid out of the front, and I said, those are Stephen's shoes. And when he got home, when my husband got home, I told him, and he said, no, you're just jumping to conclusions. And that whole night, I didn't sleep, of course, because he didn't come home. His friends came home without him and said they couldn't find him. And we called the morgue. We described him. We said he had on braces, Do you have a kid with blondish hair and braces? No, we don't have one. Well, then Joe Heltman, who lived across the street, and he was Stephen's best friend of the whole group, he and his sister Barbara went down to the morgue. He was the one that Stephen was supposed to ride home with. And they identified him there and came back at 5 in the morning and told us.
My friends started to gather there, and eventually we had everybody that we went down there with, just about, I think. And anybody asked, has anybody seen Steve? And nobody had seen him, and we figured he was just, he went off with somebody else,
Stephen Preston was 19 years old and had just graduated from Finneytown High School.
Everybody called him Pips. Pips was a nickname that was given to him pretty early because of his appearance. He was very slight in appearance, smallish with long, sort of straw color hair, bright eyes, some freckles. And somebody started calling him, in our group, Pippi Longstockings, which shortened up to Pips.
Stephen was in the middle of braces. He had an orthodontic appointment the morning of the Who. I had talked with him that night when he came in, and I said, I want you to attend your appointment tomorrow morning. And he said, I'm not going. And I said, what do you mean you're not going? And he said, because I want to be first for the festival seating. And that was it. That was the last time I talked to him.
Oh, for months, how many months? Every day. I can't wait till the Who concert. And we were like, oh.
Jackie Eckerly was 15 years old. She didn't come home after the show.
I called the morgue and described Jackie, and they said, no, we don't have anyone like that here. So I said, oh, okay. And I told my mom, I said, well, I'm just going to go back home for a while. If you need me, call me. And as I was going, their driveway was long off the road on the bend on Seymour. And I was going up the hill, and I saw a police cruiser slowly going as if looking for a house. And so I stopped and said, are you looking for an address? And they said yes, and it was ours. So they took me down to the morgue, and I identified her. And then I had to call home, and then I came home. They brought me home. And that must have been maybe 2 in the morning. It was in the night. It was late.
Jackie went with Karen Morrison, Sandy Cottle, which was our neighbor right next door, and another girl that I don't know her name. And they all rode down together because they wanted to go early to get in line, to get a good seat. But at some point, they got split up.
Karen Morrison was also just 15.
The Who concert was her first concert. She was a month shy of being 16. She never got to get her driver's license. She never got to vote. She never got to graduate from high school. She never got to go to her prom. She was going to be going to a Christmas dance, and she was buried in the dress that she bought to wear to the Christmas dance. It was just devastating. And the devastation didn't stop there. It didn't stop with the sudden knowledge that their daughter was dead. My uncle, who's 91 years old, still grieves.
The community of Wyoming, which borders Finneytown, was also affected.
My brother Peter was one of the 11. I mean, every time I see those pictures of the shoes laying out there and stuff, it's like, which one of those is his? And, those are not easy pictures to look at.
Peter Bobes was 18 years old. He went alone to the show and planned to meet friends.
It was bad weather, cold weather. Everybody was, trying to get in, wanted to get in. Nobody expects to go to a concert and expects to die.
I think I was a little shocked
how could it, and then questioning how could it all be all from our school, that many from our school, the percentage, and I'm trying to do my math, the percentage, like that's a big chunk of the people, you know, and they were all so young, and, you know, what do you say to people when you go to school? Well, you know, how do you react? Right. You know, I'm 17 years old. I didn't know how to act or react.
Sadly and tragically, what happened that night changed us all. It changed everything. We were carefree, you know, partying, a bunch of kids who threw caution to the wind quite a bit, lived somewhat dangerously at times. That night, as we were approaching our 20s, early 20s, late teens, it just kind of changed everything.
Peter Bowes, Karen Morrison, Jacqueline Eckerly, Tiva Ladd, David Joseph Heck, Stephen Preston, Brian Wagner, Walter Adams Jr., James Wormuth, Connie Sue Burns, Philip Snyder.
From what I understand of the situation at the Coliseum is that the unfortunate deaths that took place were due to some sort of trauma of some kind of activity down there. It does not appear to be drug-related deaths. I want the community to understand that and not to worry that there's something out there going to poison or harm their children, friends, or relatives. It appears that most of what has happened has been due to trauma, and I want to make that very clear.
Thousands of people had no idea what was going on outside of the Coliseum, and those who witnessed the mayhem were in shock.
At that time, the emergency vehicles were already driving onto the plaza, so the body bags were being zipped up. You know, we weren't that far away from
coats, shoes.
Right, the pile of all the clothing.
All over.
I think we were in a little bit of shock. The concert, I couldn't remember what songs they played, nothing. It was a blur.
It was a blur.
It's the first concert I've ever been to. I was waiting for it to end, if that makes any sense. I just wanted to get out. And I don't know why we just didn't get up and leave.
11 people died and dozens were injured, but the show continued.
I think it would have been an absolute disaster to try and shut it down.
What triggered the chaos? Festival seating was a major factor.
Historically, festival seating drew people very early in the day because festival seating is a first come, first serve. You know, those in the door get the best seats in the house or get right in front of the stage.
People were anxious to see the band and escape the cold.
But on this particular night, at 1:30 in the afternoon, people had started to gather for an 8 o'clock concert. We actually were asked to come earlier. By 3 o'clock, there were probably 500 people waiting to get in. And that grew exponentially. By 5 o'clock, we estimated probably 2,000 people waiting to get in.
Just by that one set of doors, right?
Just by the main entrance doors. And that continued to grow. The doors were supposed to open at 6:30 p.m. And our estimate at 6:30 p.m. were 12,000 people were waiting to get in. That was unbelievable. We'd never, ever experienced that before.
Over the years, I've heard several explanations, and the one that keeps coming up is that they heard The Who doing a sound check, the audience outside lining up in the cold, and they heard The Who doing a sound check. They thought that was them on stage, and so they crashed the doors. But none of this seemed to correlate for me because, one, we didn't do sound checks so much in those days, and two, if we did, it would have been like 4:30 in the afternoon. I went back and checked. We didn't have a support act. What we had was a 10-minute trailer of the movie Quadrophenia, and we ran that before The Who went on stage, and that trailer acted as a support band. So on giving this a lot of thought, I'm sure that what the audience, the fans heard while they were queuing up was the film crew checking that trailer to make sure that it was running okay. And of course, if the audience heard that, if the fans heard that from outside, they did hear the Who, of course. It was Who music. So that's the only explanation that's really rung true with me.
Police reports show that only a few doors were used to filter more than 18,000 people inside the venue. It's an image Stephen Preston's stepfather has replayed over and over again in his mind for years.
There was so much pressure. There were 18,000 kids, and they were essentially funneled across this walkway that led to the Coliseum, and then it was focused down to these two turnstiles. And 18,000 kids were supposed to go through two turnstiles and show a ticket at a Who concert, as if they're going to do that in an orderly manner. So by the time that the kids had heard the band warming up and they knew it was getting late, and the crowd at the back was getting antsy, the kids that were at the front were just mashed up against the glass. They were probably not even touching the ground from all the pressure of 18,000 people behind them. The first reports about there being a problem So, there were a few minutes after that, like 15, before the doors were opened, and that would certainly have been long enough. The mental image of that moment. Yeah, it was hard. Just imagining being there.
Don't imagine. I think Jack